Okay, so for the second try of this is about how antipsychotics slash psychotropics cause EDs and body dysmorphia in kids. I really should have put how they cause childhood obesity, but I'm going to use somebody's story. And of course, I'm not going to say names or anything, but just like a little bit of their story. I'm not going to like say the full situation, but just like the main parts that actually have something to do with what I'm talking about. Okay, so number one, they cause weight gain, quote unquote weight gain. And the reason I say quote unquote is because when you confront mental health professionals about the weight gain side effect, no. When you confront them about how you're becoming obese, the doctors will tell you it's just weight gain. In fact, I was even told that back when I had to turn out the bowel side effects and I had the bowel impactions all the time, that I could have died from, where I would look pregnant. And then when I confronted the doctors about this specific doctor, she didn't like me or my dad. It was really obvious that she was racist. And one of the things that I noticed a lot in my situation is that due to the fact that my mom was a Willie Lynch syndrome house Negro with Munchausen, these racist Caucasian lady doctors and even the males would they would go along with her because they hate us. And that's the thing, something that my mom seemed to not realize. At one point I was saying that she just didn't care. Maybe she didn't, but I kind of still feel like she just didn't realize it. These people, and I'm talking about the doctors that actually have something to do with the diagnosis, because like people who know my situation, you'll see the people like once we moved to GA that would say something about it but not do anything. But it was in North Carolina, all at really this one place where I got over 17 mental labels at 12. So it's like you'll see a lot of other people well, at least in the videos I used to have anyway, but a lot of people have something to do with it, but it was really only a little bit of people that actually helped my mom create the whole situation. But anyway, they would just go along with my mom because they were racist and they wanted to help ruin the lives of people who look like me. But my mom I think she felt like those people actually believed her, but nobody ever believed Jack that she said. They just did it because, for one, they get paid to abuse kids, because that's like the whole point of the Cash for Kids system, and two, they were racist. So yeah, anyway, so this one doctor, she didn't like me or my dad, and she would make that clear and actually like say stuff about that. And she tried to tell me that me being worried about my bowel impaction was just me having a fear of weight gain. First of all, who only gains weight in their stomach, especially at that age? Who gains weight specifically just in their stomach? It doesn't even make any sense. Pregnancy weight. Well, actually, not even pregnancy weight. It's like, I don't know what to call it, but it was just really a really stupid situation. I was supposed to have made a video about it a long time ago, and I've been saying I was going to do it for years, but I never end up doing it. I was supposed to make a video specifically about this doctor, which I don't even remember if she was a psychiatrist or if she was the gastrointestinal doctor. But anyway, so when you confront them about how you're becoming obese, they tell you it's just weight gain, because of course they're not going to tell you that these drugs are made to block neural pathways and turn off neurotransmitters that make the body work, which is neurotoxic, and then it kills brain cells and it gives you brain damage, and then you start having all these mental and physical health problems and neurological problems that eventually lead to death. They're not going to tell you all that. But this is actually metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is the psychotropic brain damage effects giving you diabetes and heart failure. Although the more noticeable symptoms that you'll notice that revolve around your heart will be from the serotonin syndrome. So, like the heart palpitations, a lot of that stuff comes from the serotonin syndrome. But yeah, anyway, that was just kind of like a side note. Some extra pounds can also come from the turn off the bowel side effects, which causes backed up stool and eventually leads to bowel impactions and can lead to bowel obstructions and then bursting. So basically, my dad had this aunt who was on psychotropics. I don't know if they took her through the whole mental label mess or what the situation was with that. I don't know the full situation, but she was on psychotropics. She had got diabetes from the metabolic syndrome, but of course the doctors lied about why she got diabetes. And she had to turn off the bowel side effects. And so, actually, this is really common. Like, really, anybody that's on most psychotropics is going to get to turn off the bowel side effects. But anyway, she had the side effect and her bowels burst. And I forgot to say she had heart failure too from the metabolic syndrome. But her bowels burst and it came out her mouth and her butt when she died. And so that was like a really, really bad situation, obviously. So it came out both ends when her bowels burst. And the doctors just lied and said that she had a stroke. And so, yeah, so that was the lie. I'm trying to figure out where I was. As you can see, this diabetic weight makes people go from buff to fat and causes childhood obesity. I'm supposed to edit in some pictures, but I don't really know if I want to do that or not, because that takes a lot of energy that I barely ever have. So, 2. The girl's story. Similar to my situation, this abused girl was ran through the mental health system and forced on drugs starting in middle school. She was locked up over 30 times from age 14 to 15, although she only ever got 2 diagnoses. One was obviously wrong, the second is a symptom of trauma, not an actual disorder. So the second was marijuana dependency, which I find really, really stupid because that's more so a symptom. And also, I should mention that she had to secretly read her papers, her discharge papers, to even figure out what her mental labels were, because her mom would never tell her what her mental label was. And so she was diagnosed with bipolar. That was the first one. It was really obvious that she didn't have bipolar. And when I was locked up last year, after the whole situation with me trying to move out and all that, which I'll put that in the description, she what was I about to say? Oh yeah, me and everybody else in there were talking to her about how obvious it was that she had BPD. But the thing is, there's already been tests that show that like 99% of people who go in, well, kids that go into mental facilities are going to come out with a bipolar label, even though they don't have it. Because the thing is, mental facilities don't do real evaluations. They don't sit people down and then you mark off your symptoms. They don't do any of that. Mental facilities don't do evaluations. They just have you sitting in there while they rack up money. Sometimes they'll just put something random on the paper. So they'll give, like, everybody the same label. And what was the other thing? Oh yeah, and most mental facilities don't even have a psychologist or a therapist in there. And even if they do have a therapist, you're never gonna get to see the therapist because there's one therapist, and they're barely ever there. So, oh yeah, and one of her therapists a couple months ago finally admitted that she obviously has BPD. They finally said that she had BPD. Anybody with common sense knew that. And the therapist didn't admit it till after her mom died, which this was a somewhat new therapist, because she says every like 2 weeks the therapists quit because they don't get paid enough, and then she keeps getting a new therapist over and over again. Okay, so oh yeah, And then the funny thing is, she was locked up over 30 times and only got 2 diagnoses. But yet, I was only ever locked up 3 times and got 17 plus. And, like, most of them came within the first time of me being locked up. And then there's some stuff, I don't even know if it was ever really put on paper, or if my mom and her boyfriend just ran around saying it because they wanted it to. Because they wanted to. But yeah, I remember somebody once told me that some of the labels may have been word of mouth and maybe they weren't ever put on paper, but that's what I have to say about that. So anyway, she's been forced on all types of drugs: olanzapine/Zyprexa, lamotrigine/Lamictal, trazodone, Latuda, Abilify, lithium, etc. Okay. 0.2.5. Well, you can kind of just ignore that because that's what I have on the side. She said she didn't even notice she was obese until she looked in the mirror one day and realized she was obese. And it makes sense that it happened so quickly because it only takes 2 weeks of being on the neurotoxin drugs to start gaining the diabetic weight. Then the same mental health professionals and relatives who had her on the drugs made her feel bad about the weight gain. The mental health facility's nurse would say stuff to her about her weight every appointment. This is recent too. Every appointment, they would tell her about how she's overweight and how she needs to do something about that. And it's like I know that a lot of people that work in the system, in the mental health system, are just college kids trying to pay for college, which there's stories about that and how young adults have gotten PTSD from having to abuse and watch. Well, they really didn't have to do jack, but from what they said, quote unquote, having to abuse and beat on kids and watching people beat on kids in these different parts of the cash for kids system, like the mental health system, and they just told themselves, well, what do I know? Maybe the restraints are okay because people are dying from the restraints, and they were like, I'm just a college kid who's getting paid minimum wage, trying to survive, and all of that mess. So maybe some of the people don't really know about the side effects of the drugs and what the drugs actually do. And I'm assuming maybe that's what's going on with this nurse that was basically talking down on her for being obese, which she couldn't even control it because it was just the pill side effects. And once you get off the drugs, you lose the weight. But then again, it could have just been the usual gaslighting that they do in the mental health system or in all of these systems that are under the Cash for Kids system. So, okay, saying stuff to her about her weight every appointment. She also got bullied for being obese, which all made her feel worse about herself. She even was facing food insecurity. Okay, I had ran out of storage space, and so I ended up having to upload a video, which had been taking like 3 days to upload to have space to record this part. But anyway, she even was facing food insecurity and barely ever eating. So the doctors telling her to do something about her weight was just confusing to her. Now she's secretly off the drugs and getting questioned when she goes in for med appointments. Or not even just med appointments. It's just check-in appointments that are supposed to be therapy, but like I said earlier, which I hope I said earlier because I was supposed to, the therapists quit every 2 weeks because they're not getting paid enough. So it's just been therapist after therapist after therapist. And of course, usually kids aren't even comfortable enough to talk to the therapist about how they really feel about anything because they already know they're not trustworthy. But what was I about to say? Then, of course, there's the situations like mine where you're not even allowed to talk to the therapist. So, I mean, wait a minute. Is this a spider? Wait a minute. Okay, it was just lint. So, to get back on topic again, 3 or 4 days later. Where was I last at? But yeah, so it wasn't really just a med appointment, but sometimes when she would go in, they would like make her take a pill or whatever. So sometimes it was also about making sure she was taking the meds, and they would give her some pills or whatever, which is really risky, and that's a whole nother story. But it's kind of like, I mean, well, I wouldn't even say it's worse. It's probably just as bad as being on the pills regularly when you're like not really on the pills, and then you just have to take one every once in a while, or you're thrown on them for 2 weeks, like what happened once when in 2020, when my dad tried to pick back up in the Munchausen situation where my mom left off, and I was back on the drugs, but only for 2 weeks, and then he let me off again. So it's probably just as bad, but I don't know. Either way, they cause brain damage and all that regardless. So nobody should be on them at all. But I'm making this about me. That's not what I'm supposed to be doing. Anyway. Wait a minute, hold up. Okay, so anywho. Now she's secretly off the drugs and getting questioned when she goes in for med appointments about how she lost the weight. Because once you stop taking the drugs, the diabetic weight goes away as you lose the metabolic syndrome. I know for me personally, I started losing the diabetic weight within, I mean, really once you stop taking them for like a week or two, you're already dropping down. And then within 4 months, well, no. It was way less than that. Yeah, 2 weeks. I mean, it makes sense because when you start taking the pills, you gain the diabetic weight within 2 weeks, and it's like you could be underweight before you start taking the pills, and then within 2 weeks you're obese. It's really crazy. So it makes sense that within 2 weeks of being off the drugs, you start losing the metabolic syndrome weight. Now, I think if you were on them long enough, or maybe just depending on you, then you can get full-blown diabetes, and that's when, even if you stop taking the drugs, the diabetes is still there. Because I have heard stories of people saying that they haven't lost the weight, and it could be because they just got full-blown diabetes. And now I know some people end up getting diagnosed with diabetes, especially people 18 plus on psychotropics, and they're lied to about why they got diabetes. Of course, I had a teacher who was in this same predicament, but it seems like when you're under 18, they don't even mention the fact that you're showing diabetic symptoms, and they just gaslight you about the pills having side effects. I mean, they do that to everybody, but it's like they won't even acknowledge the diabetic symptoms that you're showing. And then, what was I about to say? I remember what I was about to say. Okay, so not even just the mental health professionals or the psychiatrists specifically, but even the regular physical health doctors you'll go see, they'll talk about how out of whack all of your tests come back and all that, but they won't ever point to the drugs. Especially if they don't actually know that you're on psychotropics, because I know I would have the dilated pupil symptom, well, side effect, and all the other stuff that goes along with that from the serotonin syndrome. But the eye doctors didn't know I was on psychotropics, so they just were really confused about why my pupils were dilated. And then there are some other doctors in the physical health field that seem to just not really read through the system on their patients, so they didn't know I was on psychotropics, and they didn't even know I was in that situation, so they just were confused about why I was showing all these symptoms. And then, of course, whenever I would try to bring up the psychotropics, that's when my Munchausen mom would just say some bull crap. Because you know how those situations go. Maybe you do. If you've been here long enough. Or at least, I won't even say if you've been on this channel long enough. If you ever watched the evidence channels. Because I would assume that most, if not everybody, hears from the evidence channels. But honestly, I'm not really too sure about that anymore. And I'm making it about me again. Anywho, I hate this. See, I just wanted to focus on one thing and not make this about me. Especially since I'm supposed to just be trying to move ahead as if, dang, I'm choking. Move ahead as if the Munchausen situation never happened. But anyway, because once you stop taking the drugs, the diabetic weight goes away as you lose the metabolic syndrome. Bad thing is the ridicule left her secretly bulimic and with an ED. Probably even the not eating enough left her with an ED too, because I noticed that in different situations I was in. Wait, why is my phone turning off? In different situations I was in, I just kind of got used to not really eating that much. But I mean, that's kind of how that goes, I guess. Because the body it just gets used to it, I guess. Because the thing is, her mom had a lot of issues too. Obviously, because for one, anybody in the Cash for Kids system is in an abuse situation. Or they just don't have parents in general. And of course, I mentioned the whole overdose thing. So, her mom, what was I about? Oh, yeah. Her mom had issues too. So, she wasn't able to make enough to really even get food. And then it was something where they were trying to get a disability check, but they couldn't, or either the mom was trying to, but she couldn't. I don't know. I don't think she ever tried for the daughter, but. And it's really crazy to me because it's weird how I was able to get a disability check, but then there's people out here who really need one and then they can't get it. The whole system is just weird. It's really just weird, but it makes sense because that's how abuse systems are. Probably gonna redo this because I don't even think I'd have enough space to edit this on. Plus, I made it about me too much.